Okay, folks. Great, beautiful sunny day here. I hope it's nice where you are. It got below freezing last night here in San Antonio. Not by much, degree or so, but still mighty chilly. As you know, we've been speaking on the last days, and some of you might think, well, good grief. You're talking nothing but history. You're talking about ancient kingdoms and so forth. When are we going to get to the exciting last days part? This is all part and parcel of the same thing. You can't really sort out prophecy until you get the history part. Remember last week that it was nothing but history, and not about history as such, but just why history? Why do we talk about history? Why is it important? Because in some people's minds, history is not important. It's done. We've been there, done that. On to the next thing. Who cares what's behind us? I'm just interested in what's in front of us. And that's not a real well-rounded type approach when it comes to biblical stuff. The difference from a Bible perspective of prophecy and history is nothing less than where you happen to be standing in the middle of this parade. Most of the Bible, well, let's take Adam. Everything in the Bible from Adam's perspective was prophecy. You get up to John, who writes Revelation, and when he's writing Revelation chapter 22, everything's behind him. It's all history. We have no control over prophecy. We don't know. We can't predict with certainty what might be. We can infer certain things. I know if I take an egg and drop it on the floor, it's going to splat. I get that. We can infer certain things. We have day planners. We have calendars and date books and so forth, that on such and such a date, we are going to do such and such a thing at such and such a place. Well, that's our intent. That's our plan. But it doesn't always work out. Something else might come up. Maybe the meeting gets canceled. Maybe we get sick. Maybe we die. Maybe there's a hurricane or an earthquake or who knows, whatever. But we cannot with certainty predict the future. We can't. There is somebody who can. And the reason that he can predict the future is because he's seen it already. From God's perspective, it doesn't make any difference what part of the parade you're in. Whether you're at the front of the parade and you can't see anything behind you, or you're in the back of the parade and all you can see is just the first couple of rows in front of you. From God's perspective, who sits above the parade, he sees the whole thing from beginning to end. So he has no problem with certainty predicting certain things. He knows all the what ifs. He knows the impediments. He knows the roadblocks and the stop signs and so forth. He knows what could and what will happen to mess up our prediction of the future, and he rides above it all. Turn to Isaiah, chapter 46. Isaiah 46. They had a deal in the Old Testament whereby if some guy got up and he claimed to speak in the name of God, in other words, he proclaims himself a prophet, and he says certain things to the people, you have to do this, and if you don't, this is going to happen. or you have to take this path because, that's the right path, or whatever the scenario happened to be. They had one distinctive criteria for that guy to determine whether or not he was a real prophet or not. And it was simple. If what he prophesied came to pass exactly as he said it would come to pass, then he passed the test. If he blew it in any respect, he's not a prophet. And you know what they did with those guys? They took them out and stoned them to death. You didn't mess around with those guys. They meant business. Isaiah 46 rather. Isaiah 46, beginning at verse 9. He says, remember the former things of old. Good grief. Last week, we spent the whole week talking about the importance of history. Because a lot of people, like I said, history is there, blah, boring, dead, past, who cares? Remember, God says, the former things of old. That's history. God repeats this and drills it into our heads ad nauseum throughout this Bible. He goes on to say, for I am God, and there is none else. I am God, and there is none like me. God's pulling his own chain here. He's bragging on himself because nobody else is sharp enough to do it. Nobody else knows God the way God knows God. So he goes on in verse 10. This is what makes him God, he's saying basically. Declaring the end from the beginning. In other words, he sees the whole parade. From the little girls at the front that are holding the big banner that tells you what's coming next, to the pooper scoopers at the end. He sees the whole parade. Declaring the end from the beginning. And from ancient times, the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. You don't get any higher up on the totem pole than that. He's basically saying, whatever I want to do, I can do it. I mean, who's going to stop me? Who's going to hold me back? The answer is nobody. Look over Isaiah chapter 42. I'm sorry. Isaiah 41. Where's my act together? Gotta get new glasses or something here. I'm not doing very good. Isaiah 41, beginning at verse 21. He says, produce your cause, saith the Lord. Bring forth your strong reasons, saith the King of Jacob. Let them bring them forth and show us what shall happen. He's separating the men from the boys here. He's in essence, he's saying, put up or shut up. Bring your strong cause, bring your reasons. If you think you're hot stuff, prove it. Don't just talk about it, prove it. Let them bring them forth and show us what shall happen. Let them show the former things, what they be, that we may consider them and know the latter end of them, or declare us things for to come. You want to stand toe-to-toe with God? Have a contest with him? So show me the former things. Show me the things that have come to pass. Show me the things that are going to come yet. And we sit there, duh. Verse 23. Show the things that are to come hereafter. From our standpoint, that's prophecy. From God's standpoint, it doesn't make any difference because it's all the same to him. Show us things that are to come hereafter, that we may know that ye are gods. Little g there. See, God does have a sense of humor. God does have personality. He's basically just daring them. You want to stand toe to toe with me, he says? You tell me what's going to happen in the future. And if you get that right, we'll sit down and talk. So show the things that are to come hereafter, that we may know that ye are gods. Yea, do good or do evil, that we may be dismayed and behold it together. I'll tell you, I'm like everybody else. I commit my share of sin. And most of the time we get inured to it. In other words, we get used to it because there's no immediate reaction from God. There's no immediate whoop upside the head. Sometimes there is, but most of the time, God just lets us have enough rope to hang ourselves. So we sin. And because judgment is not executed speedily, we tend to sin again. We got away with it. Well, hey, I'll try it again. We might not consciously go through that mental exercise of coming to that conclusion, but in reality, that's how we're made. You can look at any little kid and watch their actions in life. They get away with something once, they're going to try it again. Get away with it again. Now it's almost a habit. Now you got to break them up. Good luck with that in this day and age. So God says, if you want to stand toe to toe with me, go ahead. So we sin. But because judgment is not executed speedily, we tend to sin again. And we just never learn. As I said before, and I've said it 100 times in these messages, the one thing we learn from history is we never learn from history. Daniel chapter 2. Said last week, that's what we're going to hit here. Daniel chapter 2. There was a king who conquered Israel, who took their king, took his boys, took them to Babylon, took the king's boys, killed them in front of the Israeli king. And then once the Israeli king got to see his boys killed, then Nebuchadnezzar had his eyes put out. So the last thing that Israeli king saw was his boys being killed by Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream one night. And he couldn't figure out when he woke up what the dream was. We've all been there and done that. I mean, just a couple of nights ago, I had a great dream. I couldn't wait to wake up in the morning and tell my wife about it. And of course, 5 minutes after I woke up, I forgot what the thing was. I try to recreate it or try to rethink it or whatever, but it's gone. Sometimes we can remember our dreams. but other times we can't. It's a 50-50 thing here. So Nebuchadnezzar, he had a dream. But when he woke up, he couldn't remember it. Look in verse 3, Daniel chapter 2, verse 3. And the king said unto them, now the them is his soothsayers, his prognosticators, the wizards, the magicians, that whole class of people that claimed that they could interpret dreams, that they could read dreams, they could read and foretell the future and so forth. This is the group that he's referring to here. And the king said unto them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac, O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. Well, duh, of course they're going to go through that monkey motion. Show us the dream. Yeah, we'll make up something. You're not going to know the difference. That's our job. That's our job description, interpreting dreams. And we tell you whatever we want to tell you. You'll never know that because you're all wrapped up in the fact that we're the Chaldeans, we're the magicians, we're the soothsayers. That's our job description. It's to be able to interpret things. So, hey, tell us the dream. And we'll fill in the blanks for you. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the thing is gone from me. If you will not make known unto me the dream, with the interpretation thereof, ye shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill. That's a pile of crap. That's their option. Not only do you tell me the interpretation, anybody can do that. Anybody can make up anything. But he put one over on them. You tell me the dream, and then the interpretation. And if you can't, this is what's going to happen to you. Well, needless to say, they absolutely freak. Verse 6, but if you show the dream and the interpretation there, ye shall receive of me gifts and rewards and great honors and so on and so forth. So there's a carrot and a stick here. You show me the dream with the interpretation. I don't want just the interpretation. No. I want the dream because I've already forgotten it. I don't know what it was. I'll recognize it when you tell me, but you have to tell me the dream. That's the crux of this whole matter. The interpretation is secondary. Tell me the dream. If you can't, I'm going to kill you. Make your houses a dung heap. But if you can, I'll give you anything you want. Wow, what an incentive. It doesn't get any better than that. Look at verse 7. They answered again and said, I'll tell you, folks, this little next statement, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. They're talking to Nebuchadnezzar. He is by far in history the most autocratic, the most powerful human being that ever walked this earth as a man. They're in his face. They are so panicked about that thing that he just gave them, that carrot and the stick. Tell me the dream, or if you do tell me the dream, I'll give you this. And they instinctively, intuitively, they didn't have to wonder about this. They knew they couldn't do it. And so when he uttered that pronouncement, that threat to them, they freaked to the point that they are literally in his face. They are repeating what he's already told them not to repeat. Oh, king, tell us the dream. He just got done telling them, I don't remember the dream. So the level of panic in these guys to get in of all people's faces, Nebuchadnezzar, is off the chart. That's how afraid they were. So they get in his face. Tell us the dream and we will tell the interpretation. The king answered and said, I know of certainty that you would gain the time, because you see, the thing is gone from me. He says, you guys are just stalling. You're hoping that I'm going to forget this whole incident. You're hoping that I'm going to just, let it go. And, oh, well, I gave it a shot, but, these guys couldn't come through. And, okay, no harm, no foul. And, next. No. Nebuchadnezzar's not letting this one go. He's got a tiger by the tail here, and he doesn't know what to do with it. And if these guys don't bail him out, they are in deep, deep, deep trouble. So he says, but if you will not make known unto me the dream, there is but one decree for you. For ye have prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me, till the time be changed. In other words, until I forgot about this whole incident. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I shall know that ye can show me the interpretation thereof. He's nailed it. I don't want the interpretation without the dream. I could do that, he's saying. But you show me the dream, and I'll know you guys have something. Remember, this is their job description. That's all they're there for. That's all they do. This is what they're getting paid for. The housing, the clothing, the perks, the baubles, the stuff, whatever it is. This is what their job description is. Interpret dreams, tell the future. Now remember, Isaiah said, hey, or God said in Isaiah, if you think you're hot stuff, you go ahead and tell me the future. Now here's an incident, a couple of books later, whereby this opportunity comes up. Of all the people on the planet to get this dream, it's Nebuchadnezzar. And these guys are batting zero at this point. Verse 10. The Chaldeans answered before the king and said, and this is an unbelievable admission, because these guys know that their life is forfeit right now. I mean, they're working under false pretenses, and they've come to the conclusion that the king knows it and they know it. Everybody knows it. And so they just give up. Chaldeans answered before the king and said, there is not a man upon the earth that can show the king's matter. These guys just confessed. We're a bunch of frauds. We can't do it. There's not a man on the earth that can do this thing. Therefore, there is no king, lord, nor ruler that asks such things at any magician or astrologer or Chaldean. So they're saying, why are you putting us in this position? Well, what do you mean, why are you putting us in this position? That is your position. You claim to be able to do this thing. You claim to be able to tell the future. You claim that you could do this, that, and the other thing. He's just finally putting them to the test. All the other stuff, the interpretations and whatnot and so forth, that's just a bunch of gobbledygook. Verse 11. And it is a rare thing the king requireth. And there is none other that can show it before the king except the gods. That's in a little g. These people are not believers in God the Father God the Son and God the Holy Spirit. This is a little g. In their world, all the little idols and all the little amulets and all the little tokens and stuff, that's their gods. And in their mind, those gods are above them. But they don't go far enough to give God himself the credit. But at least they fess up and admit that they're frauds, that they're just a bunch of windbags and hot air. So nobody can show it except the gods whose dwelling is not with flesh. So after that confession, which is basically a sentence of death on these guys, for this cause, the king was angry and very furious and commanded to destroy all the men of Babylon. The wise men. Now, the story could end there, and we could go on and pick up on the next chapter and so forth. But there was one little hiccup from God's perspective, and that is that Daniel was associated with this group of guys. The Bible doesn't say that Daniel was a soothsayer and a magician and all that kind of stuff, but the class of people that he was in, the intellectuals, the smart guys, the professors and so forth, they're all lumped into the same thing, which now includes Daniel and his three buddies. So when the decree goes out to kill all the wise men, all the magicians, all the professors, all the soothsayers and the wizards and so forth, Daniel is caught up in that net with them. Daniel's not part of this group here that Nebuchadnezzar is speaking to right now. Daniel's out someplace doing his own thing. He doesn't have a clue this is going on at this point. So word gets back to Daniel. Oh, by the way, Daniel, the king issued a decree, and you're slated for the chopping block, a week from next Tuesday or whatever the date happened to be. Daniel says, say what? Oh, yeah. Didn't he hear? The king had a dream, and he wanted to know what the dream was and the interpretation. He goes to the wise men and the magicians and so forth, and they couldn't answer it. And he says, you're all history. And he said, whoa, just a second here. So Daniel goes to his boss, Arioch, who's head of the eunuchs and so forth. And he goes to Arioch and he says, what's this I hear about we're all going to get killed? And Arioch says, yeah. Those guys, proved themselves frauds and fakes and so forth. And the king's just PO'd and that's it. He's going to get rid of a lot of you guys. Daniel says, give me a little time here. I just heard about this thing. I mean, I don't know what the dream was. I don't know what the interpretation was, but just give me a second here. So Arioch goes to the king and he says, yeah, okay, blah, blah. So Daniel grabs his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they have an all-night prayer session. Because they're all going to get killed for nothing that they've done. And so they have an all-night prayer meeting. Daniel falls asleep, early the next morning, late that night, whatever it happens to be. And in that sleep, God gives Daniel the exact same dream he gave Nebuchadnezzar. And so Daniel wakes up that morning, boom. Daniel knows the dream. Daniel knows the interpretation. Daniel has it all. And so he runs back to Arioch and he says, Arioch, I've got it. Go stall the king or tell him, whatever. He's got his answer here. So in verse 26, verse 26, it says, the king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar. Remember, one of the customs they had when they took captives, they gave them Babylonian names. And so Daniel became known in Babylon as Belshazzar. So the king answered and said unto Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar, art thou able to make known unto me the dream? Again, it's always the dream first, not the interpretation, the dream, which I have seen, and the interpretation thereof? Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king hath demanded, cannot the wise men? Oh God, now it's Daniel's turn to just sink the knife in and twist it. I love it. Then Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king hath demanded, cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers show unto the king? I mean, he's dumbfounded. I mean, these guys, they profess to be the hottest guys in the kingdom. Daniel says, couldn't they give you the answer? No, they couldn't. So Daniel goes on, he says, but there is a God. You notice this is not the little g this time. This is the big capital G this time. Daniel is making a differentiation between the gods, plural, of the Babylonians, which are nothing, as opposed to the God in heaven. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets. Well, now he's got Nebuchadnezzar's attention, I'll tell you. And so he begins to explain somewhat. There is a God in heaven which revealeth secrets and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. You see, all this stuff is tied together. I know a lot of you lost faith in me in the sense that, oh, we're supposed to be in the latter days. Well, that means revelation. That means, this, that, and the other thing. No, we've got to go back. The latter days is a long time from, whatever perspective you're looking from. So Daniel says to the king, that vision that you saw happens to coincide with the latter days, the things that will be taking place. So I haven't lost my mind here. I haven't lost my train of thought. We're still in the last days. It says we happen to be in the middle of the book of Daniel in the Old Testament. Thy dream and the visions upon thy head and thy bed are these. And then Daniel goes on to explain in little minor detail what the dream was. As for thee, verse 29, as for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed, what should come to pass hereafter. Again, it's a prophetic message. The message is so long, and it stretches for basically this vision that Daniel's going to explain in just a few verses. It takes place over a 2,500-year period. This isn't a little prophecy that says, oh, by the way, 20 years from now, there's going to be a snowstorm in the middle of July. Keep your eyes peeled, because when you see it, boom, you know that I was speaking truth. No, this vision that Nebuchadnezzar had, it is a prophecy of world history from the days of Nebuchadnezzar until the return of Jesus Christ. It stretches from Daniel chapter 2 to Revelation chapter 19. From our standpoint, Now I'm talking 2022 here, almost 2023. From our standpoint, most of this prophecy that Daniel is going to get here has already taken place. It's history from our standpoint. From Daniel's and Nebuchadnezzar's standpoint, it's all in the future. That's why I keep reiterating this idea that history and prophecy are intermingled. It's hard to tell which is which until you stand at a certain spot. Once you declare that spot, then it's either in front of you or it's behind you. It's all history. And isn't it strange that we call it history? Break the word down. History. His story. Not the God of the little g, the God of the big G. His story. History. Some of it from our perspective is in the future. Some of it from our perspective is in the past. From God, it makes no difference. He sees the end from the beginning. So this image, this statue that Nebuchadnezzar saw, which represents world history from their standpoint in advance. From our standpoint, most of it is in the past. We've gone through the Babylonian Empire. We've gone through the Medo-Persian Empire. We've gone through the Greek Empire. We get into the Roman Empire. And a strange thing happens. There is an interlude when we get to the Roman Empire, represented by the fact of the two legs. And next week, we'll get into all this part. So I'm just giving you a bird's eye view of what we're going to get next week. The Roman Empire is divided into two legs, the eastern part, the western part. And at the end of these two legs, there's 2 feet. At the end of these 2 feet, there are 5 toes on each feet or each foot. As far as our history is concerned, we are now basically at the feet portion of this image. Daniel was right there at the head of this image, the very big beginning. Today, 2022, we are down to the feet and the toes. The toes haven't officially formulated yet. As far as history is concerned, what we can see around us. It is in the beginning stages. We can see the start of this thing. So this image that Nebuchadnezzar saw in his dream, it is representative of world history. From the Babylonians to the Romans, the revived Roman Empire, represented by the feet and the toes. And then finally, we're going to see that little rock that was cut out of the mountain without hands. The little rock comes down and hits the toes of this image. When the toes are hit by this rock, the toes basically disintegrate. Nothing. And that happens, the image collapses, topples over, and is destroyed. This period of time, this 2,500 years from Daniel chapter 2 to Revelation chapter 19 is what the Bible refers to as the times of the Gentiles. Israel is no longer the focal point of world history from God's perspective. It will pick up again in the future. So next week, we will hit this image, see what the components of the image are, see the structure of the image, And we will tie that to what we now know as world history. It's easy for us. It wasn't easy for Daniel. Daniel never heard of the Roman Empire as such. He never heard of the well, he knew about the Medo-Persians. He didn't know anything about the Greeks. He didn't know anything about the Romans because they were just in their infancy or weren't even formulated yet when he started. So we're going to look at the image. That is the interpretation that Daniel is going to give. Folks, I'll tell you, don't poo-poo history. Without history, you have no Bible. Without history, there is nothing to look forward to. History and prophecy, it's all the same side. History, prophecy, history, prophecy. It's all one hand. You can't have one without the other. History, prophecy, one hand. So don't minimize history. Don't poo-poo history because it's all done, gone, past, and dead, stale, rotten, whatever. It's what separates the men from the boys from God's perspective. We started out that little contest or that little dare that God had. You think you guys are hot stuff? You tell me the future. Trouble is, one thing we do learn from history, we never learn from history. We're going to repeat the same stupid mistake till Jesus comes back. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this day. I thank you for you. I thank you for the fact that you are big enough, strong enough, powerful enough, smart enough, whatever the adverb or adjective that we want to throw on there is, that you can keep this whole thing going by the word of your power. I mean, the concept of you controlling gravity, of you controlling light, of you controlling time, of you controlling just everything, just by speaking it. It defies imagination. It defies comprehension from our standpoint. And so when you remind us over and over and over again, don't discount the past. The past is the future. The future is the past. It's all intermingled. Just depends on where you're standing in this parade. And I do get frustrated, Lord, when I can see the importance of this, and yet I'm unable to convey this same importance to other people. So sometimes I just feel like sounding brass and a tinkling cymbal. Just a crashing noise. I don't get through sometimes. And that's my fault. And so I need the Spirit of God to get into the hearts of those who hear and those who listen, so that they will take an interest in history. Why? Because history is simply the future in advance. So, Father, speak to me, speak to the church, speak to those that you love, and let them know there is coming a day that this is all going to get wrapped up really, really, really fast. And for us to be able to stand there and say that we were part of it, that we got it, that we saw these things coming, that we could enjoy and relish in the fact that you are in control, that we can relish and enjoy the fact that you have predicted these things and they have come to pass, that you know where you're going, that we have this confidence in you, that the future is not just some big scary black hole that we don't know what's going to happen in, but you've got every single detail figured out in advance for us. And the way that we gain confidence in that is if we look to the past and see that the things that were initially predicted did come to pass. They were true. And when we get that idea fixed in our heads, Lord, then with confidence, we can look at the prophetic things in the future and say, if you did it in the past, there's no reason to not believe that you can't do it for the future. You've promised me a home in heaven. If I'm worried about you didn't keep your word in the past, now I'm worried about my home in heaven. If you've promised me that you're going to keep my soul forever, and I see in the past that you've blown it and you didn't come up correct and you fell short and so forth, well, I have a real problem now. I'm trusting you with my soul for eternity. And so you give us all this history stuff to prove over and over and over again that you are God, so that when you do say to us, I've got your back, I'll take care of you in the future, we can with assurance trust that and take that one to the bank. But Father, I thank you for history, and I pray that you would bring this home to each and every one. We gain confidence in seeing how your word was performed and kept in the past, so that we have confidence that you're going to keep it in the future. Lord, all I can do is say thank you. In Jesus' name.